Well, I hate to break the news to you. Between CNN and MSNBC, double them up. Fox is higher rated. You're not trying to convince everyone. What you're trying to do is expose people to your ideas in a balanced approach, not screaming, not yelling, counterpunching, but in a way that says, here's our plan. Democrats cannot be afraid of that, and they got to get out of their circles. They must.
Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. I've got Senator Mark Begich with us today as part of this series on Democrats from deep red states. Senator, I'm sure being from Anchorage, you spend a lot of time around Republicans. You probably couldn't help it even if you wanted to. Were you as surprised as I was by the results in November, or did you have a better sense of what was happening?
Yeah, first, I got to always say, because as a good Democrat in Alaska, we're not as deep as people think. Kamala Harris won Anchorage, which is 43% of the state. The congressional candidate only won by about a point and a half. And our Senate and state House actually coalitions. This is a crazy coalition, House and Senate, led by Democrats. It's kind of a weird dynamic here. But your question is an interesting question. I was not surprised, sadly, because Democrats, and I'm probably a critic of our own, and I should say that, and that is, we missed the mark. We weren't talking about the things. First off, we weren't taking credit for the many things that we had done. We suddenly thought about it toward the end of the election. Well, that's not the way it works. You know this in the broadcasting business, repetitive messaging. Example, and I can say this from a Democrat from a red state, that, in the last 3 years, we have in this country produced more oil than any country on the planet, even Saudi Arabia. But no one wanted to talk about it because, in all due respect to my friends on the climate change side, you'd get zapped by the climate change lightning rod. But what's amazing about it, not only were we producing more oil, we increased renewable energy in this country for our own production of electricity. I think it was about 25%. So we were moving the right direction. Economic growth, multiple months of continued economic growth, lowest unemployment in decades. But for whatever reason, I hate to say this, Democrats cannot talk about good things they have done. They want to talk to you about policy until you fall off the cliff because you're falling asleep. I'm sorry, I'm so critical of my own. I tell them this, my former colleague, I wrote a memo on this after the election. I said, focus on three things. First, he's going to get 98% of his nominees. And if he doesn't get them, it's because they've gotten rid of them before they got to the vote. But he's not going to lose votes. He's going to get them. So focus on using those opportunities to talk about the Democratic message. Two, have a message, and it can't be anti-Trump. Trump is there. Americans want to know, what are you going to do for them tomorrow? As people say, well, that seems so crass. No, that's 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. We have to talk about what matters in crime. And yes, Democrats made big error on immigration. Should be simple. You commit a crime in this country, if you're not illegal immigrant, you're going to go to jail. If you are a legal immigrant, you're going to get deported. Pure and simple. But we had to caveat that and have nuances. We twisted and turned like a pretzel. And, we lost the argument. Even though in the last quarter plus, there are more people deported in this country than any time. But, we don't want to talk about that because we're going to get sued by ACLU. Well, of course you're going to get sued. But we have to reach into talking about crime. Education is an incredible component. We have a good pivot. He wants to get rid of Department of Education. Don't go into that. Go into what are you going to do to make sure we have job-ready kids for the future of this country. Why should we have importation of individuals to come into our country because we don't have the educated population to do it in the high-tech wing? Well, let's figure it out. And the last thing I'll say on this is that Democrats have to be succinct in that message. They don't have to do everything in the world. People concerned about walking out the door, and are they safe? Do they have a job for the future? Are their kids going to have a better life than they have today? And can we solve these issues and take them off the table? Immigration being one of them. But don't get so wrapped around like a pretzel. Sorry, I went on a rant there, but I'm so
That's good. No,
excited you
I
asked
want
the
to
question.
I want to go into the messaging in a second,
Sure.
but can you talk about some of the Alaskan idiosyncrasies first so that this audience, most of which I would venture to say don't live in Alaska, don't know what ranked choice voting is,
Yeah,
some of your innovations have created this coalition that actually serves Alaska really well and that the rest of the country could learn from.
you bet. First, ranked choice voting, and we want to get some more Alaskans looking at your podcast, so we'll figure that out. But
Okay.
here's the thing that I think is important about ranked choice voting. Now, I will tell you, I opposed it when it first came out. Actually, my son, I wrote a piece with a former Republican governor opposing it. My son, college graduate, just graduated, wrote an opposing piece. And I was like, okay. But the voters spoke. Slim margin, but they did it twice. The first time they voted, they passed it. And I believe that's the voters' choice. Here's what it's done. Now I'm a big supporter. This last election, I supported it. Ranked choice voting. Here's why. It forces people to think about the issues because you no longer, it's the top four, move on to the general election. And it's not, yes, you put a party identification, but you're not voted on by party. You're voted on, one of the congressional races here had 51 candidates 2 years ago. But you vote your best choice. The four move up. It could be all Democrats, it could be all Republicans, it could be independents, it could be anything. But what it does, you don't get the win with just your party. You have to figure out what issues people care about across the spectrum. And it doesn't mean you're selling out your values. You have to just, okay, do you care about education? Then describe why you care about education. And what it's forced people to be is more moderate to their positions, both on the liberal end and on the conservative end. So what's happened? End result. It was the first time last year. It was a coalition on the Senate side in the state Senate. Today it's the Senate and the House of Representatives. And oddly enough, before we got on this call, I was talking to the Republican governor, who is a big fan of Trump, but he's talking to me about renewable energy programs. So it forces people to push into it. And it creates you become more tolerant of, instead of just saying no because you got a primary you're going to get elected through, now you got to say, well, I better listen. And we have not done that in this country enough. So Alaska has that. Second, the nuances of a Democrat up here, you could be a Republican on the East Coast because usually you support gun rights, manage gun rights. Don't, not like everyone runs around and does whatever. But two, you're more than likely more natural resource development, but responsible. And Alaska has proven the case time and time again how to do that the right way and make a project. So you have this little nuance with Democrats. And on the East Coast, you might be considered a moderate Republican. But that's the unique thing about Alaska. The ranked choice voting has been very powerful in changing the dynamics.
How did you pull it off? Was it a ballot measure? Is that how it became law?
Yeah, the legislature, and all legislators, both national and state, they're sometimes incapable of seeing the future. I'm my own critic when I was in office too. I said the same thing. So it didn't change. But what I think did it was the public brought it forward. Now, there's some groups, out-of-state groups, that brought a lot of money to the table to help people understand how this works, because there's a lot of education about it. I think voters, even though they were close this last election, they reaffirmed it, right? So it's happening again. I think there's another piece to this they need to do. And also, we had a very good campaign law, but it was thrown out in the court systems. Now it's unlimited. It's crazy. But the one thing we should do, we do it in Anchorage, which is, again, 40-some% of the population of the state. We do mail-in balloting. If you want a higher participation, then you need to do something that makes it more convenient for people. But more importantly, with ranked choice voting and mail-in ballot, what happens is people discuss the elections versus, oh my God, I forgot to vote. I got to run to the ballot box. And no, they get the ballot, 2 weeks ahead of time. You already got your campaign literature. Now you're having conversations, and the ballot's sitting in your hands, so you have control of when you deliver that ballot. So I think that's a piece that if any state's thinking about ranked choice voting, they should think about that.
It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break to say thank you to everyone who supports this show via Patreon. We're adding exclusive content every week there, so if you haven't signed up yet, head over to patreon.com/Ken Harbaugh. Every single cent we get through Patreon goes back into this show, whether it's researching topics like the piece we recently did on the U.S. Army's counter-fascism training during World War II, or my reporting trips to Ukraine to show what that country is doing to defend its democracy. These episodes can't happen without your support. I'm deeply honored that so many of you have pitched in. If you've been waiting, now would be a great time. We've got another reporting trip to Ukraine coming up and other ambitious projects in the works. We're all in this together. Thanks for everything. I want to get back to the messaging because we need all the help we can get. And you've certainly diagnosed the symptoms. We cannot break through on positive messaging about our accomplishments. We don't seem to adequately identify the dangers that policies from the other side pose. But can you get to the root cause? Is there something constitutional, I'm putting that with a lower C, right, about the Democrats' makeup that makes it so we can't coordinate on messaging in the same way that Republicans can?
It's in our DNA. And that's what I would say. We can't help ourselves. We'll debate ourselves on the same issue at times because we're passionate, right? When we talk about healthcare, it's not about just get the best rate. It's about how do we make sure that family that's living paycheck to paycheck has the capacity to get the best quality care. And then we'll get into this convoluted conversation. If you remember, we used to talk about bending the curve. What was that? But we couldn't help ourselves, right? Bend the curve. And so I think the root challenge for Democrats, and I know some will hit me over the head on this, we have lost touch with the everyday person. Every morning in Anchorage, they're called holiday stores. Well, now they're called Circle K's. So, but they're like a 7-Eleven. Every morning I go to one. One, because, yes, I don't drink coffee, but I do drink Coke Zero. So I got to have my caffeine. But, I go in there and the clerks know me, I have conversations, but I think we have lost that touch. And I also think Democrats are in too much of the mode of, like, I didn't go to college. I went for 1 year. I was the only any senator when I served that never went to college. But I'm proud to say I was chair of the Post-Secondary Education Commission for the state of Alaska for 7 years in Student Loan Corporation. We sometimes will tell you what we think you need because that's what we experienced, right? What we are saying with that is we don't trust you to make the right decision. If we believe in the American experiment, then we have to believe that people will predominantly, not all the time, predominantly make the right decision through trial and error. That's a fact. But when a couple senators realized I had not had college, I felt the brush, right? But also enjoyed 2 years after I got in, I was in the 5th position of leadership of the United States Senate. And so I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, But I think we have to value everyone. I don't care if they're sweeping the streets or they're running a major corporation. And I think we do not do that enough. We do lip service. We have to change the dynamics, and that means get out of the DC bubble and get out of your staff bubble. Staffs are always protecting you. You saw how quick it was when you made the request. I said, absolutely. We can't be afraid. I go on conservative talk radio. I'll call them up. I got their inside phone numbers. I call them up here in Anchorage and I get right on them. But I also, when I agree with them, I get on that call. because people who said I've been on Fox, and when Pete Buttigieg, former mayor, and I was a former mayor, when he was thinking about running, he and I had a little conversation. I said, "Go on Fox," and he said, "Oh well," I said, "Go on Fox." Remember his town hall meeting?
Of course.
Rave reviews, rave reviews. We cannot, and the people say, "Well, you're giving them credit." Well, I hate to break the news to you. Between CNN and MSNBC, double them up. Fox is higher rated. You're not trying to convince everyone. What you're trying to do is expose people to your ideas in a balanced approach, not screaming, not yelling, counterpunching, but in a way that says, here's our plan. Democrats cannot be afraid of that, and they got to get out of their circles. They must.
Well, I was going to end with a question about advice for Democrats in the first 100 days. I think you hit the nail on the head, though. Get out there, talk to people, and meet voters where they are. Is that about it?
Yeah. I'd say one last thing, and I said this to them back in October prior to the election, and then after election I wrote this. I said what I would do, and if you notice there's some articles coming out, some inside leaking of the caucus on the Senate side, they don't know what the message is, right? They should have done, and I suggest this before Trump got sworn in, they should have done what Newt Gingrich did. He had the contract, depends how you look at it, for America, against America, whatever people wanted to call it back then. But he had a plan, right? Something people galvanized. Democrats have to first acknowledge we're not going to satisfy everyone. Second, lay out a simple plan, 3-4 items, and then deliver it over and over again. If you come into a hearing and you're talking about, sports issues, bring it into your plan. If you're talking about Ukraine, bring it into your plan. But Democrats always like to go down the rabbit holes because Republicans are very good to lead you down the rabbit hole while they're over here. So 3-point, 4-point plan, bold, don't be afraid of it. You're going to get some hardcore liberals upset a little bit. Stay to it and lay it out there like this is what America's, and talk about it in an aspirational way. That's what I would do.
Well, thank you, Senator. Pleasure having you. Let's get you back on the show soon.
Love to. Thank you very much. And we're going to get some Alaskan audience. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.